Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, where I've noticed posts covering finance and property news. It's Monday evening once again, and of course, Edwin is back for another rant. Hello, Edwin. How are you?
I'm doing well, Martin, apart from being a bit cold and nippy. It's getting colder by the week now. So out
Yep.
comes dinner, and I'm still waiting for my bloody fireplace to turn up.
Yes. Well, of course, we have a bank holiday here in the UK. And so, of course, it's thundery, wet, stormy as you'd expect on a bank holiday. But it is a little warmer than it's been. And as we sort of approach the summer period, we get the occasional warm day, but then we go back to cooler days. And I'm fascinated here in the UK that everybody's now saying, oh, the sun is so strong. And I'm thinking, boy, you've no idea. Strong sunshine, you want to go to Australia.
Yeah, look, don't bring any more. Don't bring any more Brits over here, Martin. We've got enough people coming, and shortages of housing and accommodation, particularly the areas where they like to move into. So it's not everybody's appetite or palate to go to the fringes of Sydney, but that's where people are going to be forced to go to, the outer fringes of Sydney. I'm talking about all the way to Gosford, your old neck of the woods. We're going to start seeing some of those property prices bounce back up. Your old neck of the woods, and also we're already seeing that happening already, bouncing back in the Central Coast. But according to the domain Sydney region, it's still hot. I mean, we're going to talk a bit more about the numbers, but more importantly, what's coming on market and how people are being deceived.
Yeah, I think it's quite important. And in fact, there was this article that said that price rises are forcing buyers to the fringe. Far-flung suburbs in Western Sydney have recorded the strongest house value growth in the past 3 months. And, this is what I'm hearing again and again, that people are really struggling with, where to look and trying to find somewhere that they can afford, and they're having to go a long way out. My other observation, and I've had a couple of one-to-ones over the last week, where people are a long way out and are still having to make huge compromises on the property that they're buying. So they're buying, frankly, not a star, but a dog of a property right out in the, out in the western regions or regions, or going south or up into the Central Coast. But I guess the critical thing I think we've got to underscore, Edwin, is wherever you buy, you should not compromise on the critical decisions about buying a property, because you can buy a dog anywhere.
And there are a lot of those dogs coming up. There are a lot of pigs with a lot of lipstick on, or there's a lot of turds that have been polished that are on market, and people are falling for it. And more to your point, Martin, remember when you started reporting about how the prices were really skyrocketing in the southwestern region, your Campbelltown areas, your Campbelltown LGAs down there. I mean, properties have just gone northward bound at a speed of knots. It's amazing just watching it. Likewise, as we watch the Blacktown LGA, because that's always been in many ways, it's been the canary in the coal mine for many decades as to what happens there, because of the diversity of the ethnic diversity, also the landscape, and the very diverse income streams and who's actually moving in there. So you've got that market. It's always been an interesting market. We see the swell back in the mid mountains and mountains regions. Now, I mean, but Martin, when you start talking about your Emu Plains, you start talking about some of these, you're saying Clares, and when you're talking $1.2 million or $1.3 million for something that's got a bit of swish to it, it's a lot of money. It's no small change. And these are the markets where, if you recall from back in the previous state government and federal government, these are the markets that we said will always be impacted by all the free goodies that they were throwing at people, trying to allegedly or supposedly quench the those home rises, the price rises, which you and I said, it's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result. I mean, this has been happening since the early 2000s, and nothing's changed other than property prices keep on going up. And the unfortunate people that got thrown under the bus and continue to be thrown under the bus are the first home buyers, the ones that just want to have a roof over the head for longevity of tenure, for peaceful enjoyment of life with a roof over their head. Likewise, we've got the same thing happening in the rental arena as well. Those that don't feel the need to buy or don't want to buy, don't want to commit to a mortgage. They're obviously they're still on good incomes. The prices are big. They're being prices for rental homes or accommodation that you could say is fit for purpose, fit for use, is very, very expensive. And landlords know it, property managers know it, and that's why we're getting these rental increases, which is impacting on the cost of living expenses, and will continue to impact it for many years.
Yes, and it's a complex picture. And what I'm fascinated about is all of these components within the property sector. So, for example, at one end of the spectrum, you've got this article which shows you that there are suburbs where people know nobody wants to leave. So they talk about Peakhurst Heights, named Sydney's most loyal suburb, and the average holding household period there is more than 20 years, 20.7 years. And then you've got places like Summerhill and Castle Cove and Abbotsbury, all close to 20 years. So that's sort of one end of the spectrum, right? And then you see an article like this that says that the rental inflation is likely to be worse since the GFC, and recent analysis from Jarden tips rental price growth will accelerate beyond the current 15-year high of 7.8%, thanks to a combination of strong migration, low vacancy rates, and soft dwelling investments. Now, interestingly, of course, the Greens are wanting to blame wealthy property investors for the shortage of affordable homes and are standing firm on we shouldn't dial back migration. Others are suggesting that maybe migration is something that should be looked at. And, I've had a view for some time that one of the critical issues to understand here is the supply and demand disequilibrium. But it is really fascinating to watch now the debate. So here's an article talking about the chronic housing crisis in Sydney and talking about the median house price is 1.6 million for the first time. Rental vacancies an all-time low. Population growth in the Sydney region at 2.8% is actually slower than it was in Perth at 3.6% and Melbourne at 3.3% and Brisbane at 3.1%. And then they talk about the pace of population growth, the arrival of international students, overseas students, of course. And interestingly, that Domain is saying that the focus on population growth as the thing that underpins the situation in terms of Sydney's chronic market is actually a bit myopic. I actually think that probably migration is one of the critical issues, but they go on to say then that there's been really a perfect storm aggravated by inadequate supply, and that if it is a supply side issue, then it's going to take years and years and years to fix. And I thought that was interesting because there was actually some very interesting material in the budget papers relating specifically to property. And in fact, I made a show yesterday called Peddling the Housing Supply Myth Again. And it was interesting that in the budget papers, there were, for example, they highlighted the fact that housing development wait times are taking longer and longer and longer. The New South Wales development application waiting times have increased from 83 days to 107 days to 114 days this financial year. Same in Melbourne too. And they also made the point that, I thought this was interesting, there's a 1.2 million properties that the government's talking about. Well, the modelling from the Treasury Department says that if you added 500,000 homes in the Australian market over the next decade, you'd see a reduction in house prices by 20%, according to the federal budget. So there's an interesting contradiction, right? So do you want more homes or do you not want more homes? Do you want your prices to go up? Do you want them to go down, et cetera, et cetera? But, at the end of the day, what you've got is you've got a market completely out of kilter, right? People running to the fringes, the rental sector really, 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 really difficult. And yet, of course, you've still got the spruikers saying, oh, there'll be a strong spring season for home sales if the RBA signals a rate cut. So I don't know. But for me, the acid test is the rental sector, Edwin. And, we've been talking about the rental sector and how really, really difficult it is to find anything. And this data was quite interesting in terms of showing the percentages of income spent on rent in major cities according to some recent analysis. And you can see there that Sydney is well over 60%, Australia a little under 6%. The ACT is the least worse, 40%. And of course, the other issue there is that when you look at the how many affordable rentals are there for single parents, 3 in Brisbane, 8 in Sydney, and 41 in Melbourne. It is a disaster, and it's a signature signal of property failure of policy failure, in my view.
It has been, and it's been like that for over 2 decades. Interesting. When I was still running a property management portfolio, when we would assess applicants, we would assess them on 30 to 40% maximum of the percent of income spent on rent. I mean, now we're nudging closer to 70-80%, which is gobsmacking, we're really at a breaking point. I mean, I really believe that society is already begun to break down, and because it's very difficult to for families, young families, older families, single parents. Those that are on with government assistance, it's very, very difficult to survive on the straight and narrow, as they say. And you're going to see unfortunately we're going to be witnesses of a huge breakdown in a lot of aspects that keep our society you call it in check or on the straight and narrow. That's the unfortunate thing with all that this is happening. I find it interesting, Martin, that when it comes to trying to understand the housing supply and immigration policies, and they talk percentages, and the percentages seem very, very low. And this is what I say. This is the bullshit. That this is the spin when they start talking percentages. That we need to be talking. We need to be talking actual numbers. As I like to break down the numbers. The numbers really tell the story. So what percentage of what exactly? 3% of 5 million is obviously a lot. It doesn't sound like it's a lot more, but 2.5% of 7 million, you think everybody focuses on the 2.5%, but when you're talking of 7 million, I mean it's a vastly different number as well. So this is where a lot of these numbnuts in politics that don't get it. They just don't get it. They've tried to make different departments or segregate the different departments. When you want to talk about property policy, when you want to talk about property in general, all these factors have to be melted into the one pot. You can't look at it from different different sections of it and try to come up with a solution, because you don't have all the parts. You can't put the jigsaw puzzle together if you only walk away with a percentage or 20 pieces of a 100-piece puzzle. How can you put it together? How can it won't gel? It won't come together. And then on top of that, what we seem to be having and what we seem to be building, particularly under this government, is federal government is we hear numbers thrown around. We hear billions of dollars being thrown at this and billions of dollars being thrown at that, but the majority of it goes to to new departments that have been created that have gone into their own little world, when reality, as you say, is the cost of running and the longevity or the period of time when you're running a DA from start to finish. Then that's just the DA process has increased. The red tape has increased. The fees have increased. The land taxes have increased. All these things that are creating stopples for any progress. So unless you start looking at a holistic approach and bringing everything into the melting pot, where all we're going to have is very, very fragmented policy, because everybody wants to pull their every which way as it suits them and as it suits the presentation of their political bent to gather more votes. And that's the shame of it all, Martin. That is a real shame. So when we start talking about real concerns, real nuts and bolts, people are struggling. People are suffering. People are sleeping in tents, for crying out loud, under bridges in some of the best capital cities of the world, with iconic landmarks. And this is what we have. We're moving closer and closer to being a third world country. As one comedian said about another country, pretty soon we're going to be asking Ethiopia for help. The way we're going, it's crazy. And then when you start looking at how many affordable rentals are there for single parents, it is absolutely gobsmacking, and it's absolutely it just makes as they say, makes you want to cry. Makes a grown man want to cry based on that. If you have a passion or compassion for people that are in need of support, and it's crazy. The stuff that's out there, it is fundamentally, it is the worlds between the haves and the have-nots. Has just the gap between the haves and the have-nots is just increasing by the month, because of policies that are just not working. And the unfortunate thing is, Martin, in this country, is that when I say haves and have-nots, I'm talking about somebody, if they've already got into the property arena, and they got into the property arena of over the last 2-3 years, well, you may be struggling to keep up with the repayments because of the rises in interest rates. But when you look at your equity position, it's a lot, but at least you've got a position where you've got a roof over your head, as opposed to being frightened or thinking or biting your nails, or being perplexed and on medication because you don't know where you're going to be tomorrow or next month, and even thinking about where you could be, where people could be in 2 months or 3 months or 6 months time. It's absolutely stuff that we shouldn't be going through, but we are, because the powers to be can't come together and can't come to have you've got people that are simply landlords, that's they're simply a mass property, and they don't have too much thought for those that don't have, and just want to have a safe, quiet enjoyment of longevity of tenure under a roof.
Well, that's right. And the interesting observation there is, Edwin, that the Productivity Commission last week published a report that showed the bifurcation between the haves and the have-not is more extreme than ever. So people with property are doing okay, particularly if they've not got a mortgage, but a lot of other people aren't. So, the social fabric of Australia is fragmenting. In fact, when I made this show, I built this thumbnail, right, which shows the Houses of Parliament, House of Parliament there, and then a lot of people outside living in tents, and politicians looking on, find suits. But the elephant in the room, the elephant in the room is migration, right? Because of course migration is the demand side thing that nobody wants to talk about. Everyone's focusing on supply, supply, supply. But a supply won't solve the problem because, as you said, it is only one element. And so trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together is what needs to be done to be able to actually tackle it and solve it. And at the moment, people are falling off the back of the lorry left, right, and centre. And I think that's a real concern. You know, people not able to find anywhere to live, living in cars, living in tents, etc., etc. I think that's pretty disgraceful. The other end of the spectrum, of course, is quite fascinating that you have some people who are sitting there on huge assets, but perhaps not particularly well off in terms of cash flow. And of course, the costs of living are significant. So at the other end of the spectrum, there's a problem there too, insofar that now people are arguing that maybe they need to find a different way of dealing with the assets that they've got. You know, do you go reverse mortgage or what do you do? And what I find interesting is, and again in my one-to-ones I see this, at one end of the spectrum I talk to first-time buyers in the rental sector trying to get in as a first-time buyer and finding they can't afford unless they go way, way out. And then I also speak to other people who are sitting on property. They've been in property for many years. Their cash flow is getting squeezed because of inflation. And they've now got this liability because they can't afford to maintain the property that they're in. And yet they can't afford to move out of the property that they're in. So what do they do? And, you know, do they actually go back and dip their toes in the financial markets again and, you know, get a reverse mortgage? Or what do? Do they, you know, divide the property up and get a tenant? I mean, wherever you look, there are people making really, really hard decisions based on a set of settings that politicians have created over the last 20 years or so. And now the net result is everybody's actually feeling the pain, apart from politicians who seem to be doing really quite well out of this. You know, well, I wonder why that is. And, you know, a proportion of people who are sitting there saying, well, no problem for me. I don't have a mortgage. I own my property outright. The growth of value is continuing to rise. So I'm fine. But unfortunately, according to the Productivity Commission, that's about a third of the population. So 2/3, those with a mortgage, and the other third in the rental sector are being thrown under the bus. So there is something really, really fundamentally broken here.
I tell you what, tacking on to all that, Martin, when you say fundamentally broken, I didn't put it on our notes, but I'll share a story with you that I just heard over the weekend. So I've known about this property for a few weeks now, but and the auction was over the weekend, and I won't mention the LGA or the area for this property because I'll put something together and maybe share more in detail next week. But this is how broken things are, right? So you've got this property where in an LGA where the council in say 3 years are going to rezone that area into E2 into parkland, right? Now the people attending the auction, they believe that they knew about it. They were told, they were informed by the agent what was happening, but they had 5 bidders on this property, and the person that won the auction or got the property paid 27% more than what 2 adjoining properties in much better condition got offered by the council under a compulsory acquisition proposal. Basically, they got land value price. Now, this lady that bought this property, she's literally gambling that when the area is rezoned, she's gambling. So she's paid 27% over the odds, right, from what the neighbours are being offered. She's gambling, and she believes that the council are going to offer her a lot more than what she paid for on the Saturday. this is the shit that goes on out there. This is the stuff that people, people that have, I guess, that have got more money than sense. So yeah, this is the dystopia that we're living in. This is the poles apart, and people are prepared to gamble. And that 27% represents, over $200,000 than what the next door neighbours got offered for theirs under, as I said, under a proposal. And the council flagging a compulsory acquisition, and all the properties will be compulsory acquired because of the rezoning changes to that area. So this is the stuff that's going on, and then you've got people that are still throwing money at sites or properties that, with looking at potential of converting them into duplex sites. I was looking at a property for a client in Seven Hills. I was looking at it. All my numbers worked at around between 950 to $1 million, and it went over, because there were a lot of people very, interested on it. It went well over $1.05 million. I think it got closer to $1 million, 1.1. But it doesn't make sense when you look it down as a cost of acquiring the land, the stamp duty, the cost of construction, running the DA, waiting for the DA, all those costs that incurred, construction certificates and the like, or council contributions, all this sort of stuff. You're really banking on getting out on the other side with a small duplex sale, selling each duplex, for at least 1.35, in order to say, well, I did something okay for the year, because you're just buying yourself a job. But that's the stuff that's going on, and that's because of, you see in a lot of regions, a lot of markets, different markets of Sydney, you see hordes of people, 10, 20, you're still looking at 10, 20 bidders on property. You're still looking at people chasing property. And we see this week in, week out. And then the reports from the WeChat chatterers, from the silent tigers. And that's why we say what we say, and we sort of try to put all these pieces of the puzzle together to report for our followers and viewers, so they can have an idea of what's happening. I mean, the WeChat chatterers are being all over that report of Hurstville Heights, and they're saying that they're the areas that young chatterers should be looking at in order to look at buying, because of they're established. There's a lot of greenery. They're established homes, established neighbourhoods. There's obviously, they're not going to be widening the roads and so forth. So they've been talking about it already. So what you've got in that report that you've basically in that slide that you put up there, it's they're basically saying, look, stick to buying homes, stick to buying in established areas. With the open spaces and with they've got a lot of greenery, because that is where people are going to go. And any reports of lessening the student intake, more to the point from India, some colleges are going to be suffering because the student intake is going to virtually go down to going to drop by 80%. They're saying stay away from basically what that means is you just got to stay away from apartments and from those build up areas that are pretty much a no-go zone, and looking to broadening your horizons and looking at the older areas that and even the outer fringes of the Sydney region that we've been talking about, where you're now seeing a lot more WeChat chatterers, and obviously they're the areas the silent tigers of are calling the new home, because of they're established, well established. They got infrastructure. They got established high schools, primary schools, and they've got established networks, rail networks, and public transport system to get them into the city. So this is why those areas are arising. This is why we're seeing. Again, we're seeing a huge jump in home values, freestanding home values, as opposed to the apartments in a lot of areas of Sydney.
Yeah, it's interesting that the report that I mentioned earlier on, from which was attached to the budget papers, had an astonishing chart that showed how much stronger the growth in prices for houses as opposed to units has been over the last 20 years or so. And they were arguing that one of the main reasons was that there was more supply of units relative to houses. And I'm thinking, that's a little bit naive, right? Now, clearly, there have been a lot of apartments built, but you've also got to understand who's buying and what's the motivation in buying. And as we've discussed many times, Edwin, one of the things that people need to understand is that home prices are being distorted because through different lenses, the value of that property is a lot higher to some prospective purchasers relative to others. So, for example, if you can, subdivide the property, or if you can turn rooms into bedrooms and then let them out separately. So the point I want to make is that it isn't just purely a supply question. It's also about value is in the eye of the prospective purchaser. And different types of purchasers have a very different view of what that property is, what value it represents, and therefore what they're prepared to pay for it. But what it means quite often is if you're a pretty bog standard family and you're trying to compete with people who have a completely different value set and a different lens on the value of the property, you're always going to come off worst, aren't you?
Yeah, and this is the thing. This is the thing that our viewers and our followers understand very well, because we've been talking about it for a number of years, and that is fundamentally, if we get let's say the visa cancellations for applications are rejected for new students, we get thousands of new apartments being built. Obviously, that's going to take years before they materialize anyway. Or people start walking away from the ones that have got too many issues to live in. And if we had a whole bunch of apartments come on the market, it's really not going to affect the freestanding home market. And I'll go as far as the freestanding homes, villas and strata complexes, such as townhouses as well. You're not going to get you're not going to get a drop in much of a drop in prices in those areas because of the high demand, and because, as you say, what you can do and what you can do with them, what the silent tigers are doing with them, what the new kids on the block are doing with them, and what the WeChat chatters have been doing them for a very long time. And people want to live in areas, as much as they're sharing a house, but at least you've got a backyard, at least you've got space around you, you've got parks around you, you don't have all that hustle and bustle. So because we don't really have the nightlife, and we don't really have the cultural aspect that a lot of these people have, where they come from in the Asian community, or even the Indian communities, where cities literally run 24/7. You can feel hungry at 2 o'clock in the morning. You can come down from your apartment and you can stumble into any one of 10 restaurants that are still open around your neighborhood. So we don't have that type of that sort of lifestyle. We live a different life. So this is where, as I said, even if we got a lot of apartments on the market, even if a lot of apartments were being built and a lot of apartments become vacant because the students got sent home, or the colleges, those dodgy colleges got closed down, and then unfortunately, people had to go back home. I don't believe it's going to change the freestanding home price landscape, or the villa or townhouse, because of the high demand that they have, because we're not building them. We're not building them, particularly in the areas where people want to stay and live.
Absolutely. And, that dynamic is really important to understand. I am really quite concerned about the continued flood of apartments onto the market. I've been looking quite closely at some of the price trends, and I sometimes pick North Ryde as one of those areas that I look closely. And I was talking to in my one-on-ones the other day to another investor who'd bought two of those high-rise apartments in North Ryde in about, I think it was before COVID. So, it was 2017, 2018, I think it was 2019. In that sort of period, I think those prices are lower now than they were. The average cost to maintain the property, because of the higher service charges that are now coming through, and there are also some repairs that need to be done, mean that they're actually in negative cash flow on those two investment properties. They've been unable to lift the rents sufficient to cover the costs. So effectively what it means is that those two investments are now underwater. So what do? Do they sell and get out and take a capital hit? Or do they try to muddle through and hope that the investment profile changes because maybe the value of those properties will go up? And I keep reminding that in this particular conversation, yes, but look down the road. There's more being built. There's more being built. There's more zoned. There's more planned. So the chances of those units ever moving up in value are close to zero, in my view. And with the higher cost to service, it's a dog. And so, it does become a real big question for people. You bought a dog. It's never going to turn into a star. So what do?
You turn it into a hot dog. And you have a sausage sizzle. I don't know. But the thing is this, Martin, if you looked at those areas around North Ryde, as you were looking for the apartments, those particular two, they probably bought them at about, if they were 2-bedroom apartments at the time, they probably bought them off the plan around the 950,000 per unit, right? So because I know the numbers around there. Now, if they'd spent $150,000 more at the time, they would have got an older house around your West Ryde, your West Ryde, and in those areas, even closer to in between North Ryde and Top Ryde, you would have got an older house around the 1.1, 1.2 million. But this is the thing, that older house, even in its current state, if you did nothing to it and it was as is when it was built in the 60s or in the 70s, that house is now worth anywhere between 2 and 2.2 million. This is why I keep on saying, and for a very, very, very long time, I was saying the value is in the land. So that's value. Buildings depreciate, and you got to maintain them, particularly over the high-rise developments that are badly built in the first place. And now, when we were, historically, you look at those. Some of the high-rise buildings that were built even in the 70s, around Gladesville, around the Quay. I mean, they're still standing, and they're standing strong because they knew how to build. It was a different mindset when those buildings were built. Now you've got. We can't build. We simply can't build because everything is all about reducing the cost of materials, reducing the costs in order to get a higher return, to get a higher yield, and you get a higher return for and profit. So for the sake of that profit margin, we've compromised on construction. You could say, a lot of people will say, well, they're keeping to the code, but one thing is keeping to the code, but the code isn't keeping with the lifestyle changes and in many things. And there's also a lot of things that are unseen that the corners have been cut on, and historically also you got imported materials, lower quality materials, still meet our standards, but they're of a lower quality. So this is where people have just got to continuously be aware of and be mindful of. That is that the value at the end of the day, value is in the land, and hence the reason why even older homes, like I've said before, even the material that they were built in, the old hardwoods and the old timbers, the building itself, whether it's a weatherboard, has a greater intrinsic value than what it had 4 years ago because of the cost of construction and the cost of the materials. I mean, you're better off gutting the house, extending onto the existing dwelling than you are knocking it down and rebuilding. By the time, you got a new build, but you got a new build with shit material, and your cost it just runs amok. So it's an interesting time that we're in, Martin. Very, very interesting time, and people have got to be very careful moving forward. As you say, there's a lot more development, and the push for the government, both federal, state, is high rise. They talk about houses. We're going to build housing, and this and that. It's really, their definition of housing is really apartments or high-rise developments.
Absolutely. And of course, everybody's wrestling. So basically, the federal government's bribing the states to build more. The states are sort of putting pressure on the local councils to change the zoning to be able to go higher because, of course, that's the easy way to do it. But, I want to underscore, and I'm sure you do too, Edwin, there are huge pitfalls in buying the wrong property. And it's really important to make sure that you actually do your due diligence. And in fact, your other article is another example of a buying pitfall, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this is a story and that a property transaction in New Zealand, and look, they are our neighbours, and we do follow, have similar laws. So it's interesting because it narrates the journey of this young couple that bought a house where material fact was absconded, was hidden. Makeshift renovations were done to the house. It's cost the young couple $400,000 or something in legal fees to chase it, but they've got an order of over $1 million or $1 million or thereabouts to regain from the vendor. I dare say that the agent got pulled over the coals as well. I would have certainly made him a party to the claim, but it sort of couples into what we were discussing last week. With being very careful as to what you're buying, and with making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So that's a story based on that. That caption to the right hand side of that snapshot of the Daily Mail article. This is just by way of referencing a current sale. This is in Sydney. I won't say where or the region, give out the region, but this is a sale. I know this house very well. And this was a sale that occurred in 11th of the 12th, 2021. The house was bought for $1,185,000. I mean, obviously, this isn't legal advice. I'm not sharing legal advice or giving legal, it's just an opinion or thoughts. In my opinion, after reading the building report that the purchaser was given by the agent, they didn't disclose what I consider to be material fact, because it created, in my opinion, a huge loss of value to the property. And they didn't disclose material fact under Section 52 of the Property and Stock Agents Act 2002. So I believe that he still owns it. I believe that he's got a claim against the agent in this, but obviously that's up to him to pursue it. Now that property, because of the conditions that it's in, they're being now forced to sell the property because it's just going to cost too much to rectify the major issues that weren't picked up in the building report that was supplied by the then selling agent to the buyer. And the unfortunate thing is that they didn't get professional advice themselves. They didn't get independent advice, and they were umming and ahhing about calling me in to help them out with the purchase. If I'd looked at this house when they were looking at it, I would have told them, walk away. It's not for you. So the sad thing is it's being sold. Obviously, you lose stamp duty. There's a loss of stamp duty, marketing fees, and it got recently transacted for $5,000 less. Now, other homes in the area, Martin, you could say that other homes in the area have experienced a growth, on average of 250 to 300,000 from 2021. And that's conservatively. Obviously, others a lot more, because depending on the type of property. But that, in my opinion, is the loss, because now the choice is spend hundreds of thousands of dollars rectifying the problem, but still not doing anything by way of renovating the house. This is just rectifying the problem, and is the problem going to be properly rectified without you more or less got it demolished, but then the construction costs are just going through the roof, and by the time you build, you've overcapitalized. So that's the conundrum that they're in, and this is what happens. So looking further into that story from New Zealand, I dug a little bit deeper, and I dare say, Martin, that the real estate authority there got more grunt, have got more cojones than Fair Trade in New South Wales has here, because based on my readings of what and why these young couple was able to take the previous vendor and agent to the court and win, was because of their regulations for the sale of property are a lot tighter than ours.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because if you look at it, they basically underscore the open and frank discussion with the vendor around the importance of disclosing all relevant information, all of that sort of stuff. And disclosure is pretty critical. In Australia, predominantly what you have is caveat emptor, right? So, we'll tell you nothing. It's for you to find out, right? Now, if you understand those rules and you go through the right processes, including getting a proper survey, et cetera, then you've probably done it right. But there's a really interesting question, because of course the people who know the most about the defects in the property will probably be the people who are living in the property. I mean, that's pretty standard. So,
and I can tell you that 9 out of 10 times the agent knows as well.
Yes, I was going to make exactly the same point. Quite often the agent knows a lot more than they actually let on. And just to remind everybody, the agent is not necessarily working in the interests of the prospective purchaser. So as we've discussed before, there's a financial incentive process going on here. But what it means is that if you are looking at a property, you have to kick the tires yourself. You can't rely on what the agent may or may not say. You can't rely on what the vendor may or may not tell you about the property. And in some cases, they might well have done things to sort of superficially cover up. And I've seen this quite a few times, when I was in my building surveying years. It would amaze me how they'd sort of, skim over a problem and just paint over it. Or you'd have leaks, but what you do is you'd paint over the ceiling in the week before the property was showed, and hope the leaks wouldn't show. I mean, there are things that people do, as well as more structural issues like not getting the right approvals and things like that. So if you are a prospective purchaser, you have to do your own due diligence. And in Australia in particular, there is no safety net, really, is there? With limitations, there is no real way out of this. You have to do it yourself.
Yeah, there is. There's no safety net, but look, I'm a little bit more optimistic than many. I believe that there's a lot of these matters are going to start surfacing, because a lot of people over the last, particularly over the last 3 years, have been burned badly. Because of over the years we've seen a lot of fear of missing out and people buying at different times. It's the markets, the way they've moved, over the 3 years, the ups and downs and the runs of the runs on more to the point on freestanding homes have been flabbergasting from an spectator's point of view, watching these markets and following the markets across Sydney. And also because we've had such a reduction in the sale of freestanding homes that they've become more cherished, more so than your apartments. We've only just got over 7,000 freestanding homes on market, which is flabbergasting when you think about the numbers that we used to see between 15 and 2015 and even going back a bit further to 2013 to 2019. The numbers for freestanding homes are very, very high. But if you look at that and you look at the desirable aspect of owning a freestanding home, and what that's caused. Now, obviously, people have jumped in, and the unfortunate thing is, and this is why I say the governments have got to stop looking at trying to fix things on the run, like they try to fix the underquoting aspect of the shenanigans that were going on in the industry. But by doing that, it forced selling agents to come up with another novel marketing idea and say, hey, why don't we just supply the building report that basically just shows nothing to make it easier. Therefore, we look good in the eyes of the government because people aren't spending $700, $800, $850 as they were being charged. Then they're only spending $65 per report, and we look good in the eyes of the consumer, and we look good in the eyes of the government, and we look to be doing things. But the biggest loophole there is the fact that the building inspectors aren't going to bite the hand that feeds them, and those reports are going to be wishy-washy. So we go from one extreme to the other. But look, the statute of limitations here in New South Wales, if you believe that you've got a case, again, this isn't legal advice, but the statute of limitations for monetary loss, in a property transaction, if you believe you've suffered loss and you can prove it, and you believe you've got a case, as you present it to a solicitor, is 6 years. So there is hope. The other thing that a lot of people don't understand is that we're not only captured by the Property and Stock Agents Act 2002, but we're also captured by the Australian Consumer Law. So and there's a lot more that consumers, being the buyers of the property, can take on against the agent if they get good legal advice. And look, and it's not that hard to prove in many cases when material fact has been is critical to the value of the property. And it's been hidden, or you've had some rectification work to hide, and the agent knowing. Now there are certain things, but again, the easiest things for agents, that the first thing they say to vendors is, look, if you believe that this could be wrong with your property, don't tell me, because if you don't tell me, then I don't have to disclose it. I mean, that's the position they take, which is a sad state of affairs. But this is where we're at. That's why I liked how much more robust the regulations there in New Zealand are in comparison, and hence the win for the young couple. But now they've got to try to get the money out of the bastard.
Absolutely. Yeah, very important. And, due diligence is what we're talking about here. So pretty important. Just before we get to the numbers, I just wanted to briefly share this, because there's further news that insolvency rates are tracking for GFC levels, according to a recent report. Figures from the Australian Securities Investment Commission show there's been 8,742 insolvencies up to April the 30th, compared with 6,200 during the same period a year ago. And just to drive that home, that it's actually a lot of the construction sector, of course, feeling the pain. And this was announced, the New South Wales construction group Stevens Construction placed into voluntary administration. The group counts plenty of blue chip companies as clients, from Woolies, Coles, McDonald's, Dan Murphy's, BP and New South Wales government. And work done includes the Crow's Nest Shopping Centre, Dan Murphy's at Gladesville and Woolworths at Gloucester. So unfortunately, the story continues, Edwin. And, another thing which I want to underscore again is that if you are thinking of engaging with the construction sector, particularly if they're going to build something for you, or even if they're going to do renovations for you, it's ever more critical to make sure you do due diligence on the construction entity that you're actually contracting with. Because again, unfortunately, we are seeing quite a few of the builders, small, medium, and now large, turning their toes up. In some cases, they phoenix, in other words, they disappear and then come back as something different. In other cases, it's just a matter of financial pressures have got too great, the cash flow doesn't work, they can't sell off the plan like they did, and so therefore they've got no cash flow and therefore they can't continue to trade. But this is another aspect of the rich risk question that we have around construction and around homes more generally. And unfortunately, again, going back to my recent one-to-ones, I've had a couple of conversations recently with people who signed up for off-the-plan home and land packages, paid some money across, and then the builder has actually gone, feet up. So now they're struggling to work out what to do. Do they try and get another builder to come in? But of course, builders will want to charge a lot more. Do they try and sell the land that they've sort of half got? Or what do they do? And again, these dilemmas are real. They're nightmarish, but unfortunately, they're not isolated.
No, and things are only going to get worse, like we've been saying, with a lot of these companies and the mid-tier builders, which are taking on too much risk, and this is why I say, personally, where possible, look for to renovate rather than detonate and rebuild. It's very, 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 very risky. But the interesting thing, Martin, is that on numbers of businesses going. Right, it's not just builders. Obviously, builders make a big part of a big chunk of it in the construction industry, and I don't think that's going to get. But it's also a lot of other businesses, and what we are also seeing is in that it's putting a lot of. I feel, and I've seen, anecdotally from the reports that we get from the agents that we deal with in different areas that we're looking at, we are seeing a lot of properties that are coming on the market. Currently in the Sydney area, we've got over 1,200 properties more on market than what we had this time last year. And we saw that trend starting to happen from about 5 weeks ago, where we've been noting it on our Dusty's Sydney region for sale listing numbers chart. Now we are currently, based on Sydney numbers comparison to 2023, we're there's 1,200 more or so. Now, you can get excited about it in one way, but we don't get too excited, because a lot of the properties that are coming on the market are properties that people are finding it very difficult to fix, are finding it very, very costly to fix, or they've had, as we say, they've had a bit of lipstick on, and they're passed on as good property, and because of it, although we're tracking a lot more than 1,200 more. Still a drop in the ocean. 1,200 more on listings on market in the Sydney region, but the demand's still absorbing them. But people just don't know that they are buying a lot more inferior property, and paying a lot more in very affluent areas as well. So it's not just your Western regions. We're seeing this in your areas where where the price tickets are 2.5 to 3.5, $4 million.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we'll continue to watch it and look at the numbers just quickly. In Sydney last week, we had 16,235, jump forward to this week and it's 16,395. So a further increase. And as you say, now moving up that chart, so you can see there that there's quite a bifurcation compared with last year now, and that's I think a significant trend. And if you go into the story down in Melbourne, last week 26,149 properties. This week, 6,553. And again, more stories of properties coming on the market, but quite inferior properties, quite a lot of investment properties. A lot of people now getting quite desperate. And in fact, home prices in Melbourne are continuing to be probably some of the weakest across the country after Hobart, because of the fact that you've got this supply-demand problem. More people are still fleeing Victoria.
Yeah, it's the taxes. As I say, the tax is stupid. If you're going to tax investors, and yet the lease, for rent or for lease properties on market in Melbourne are forever lower than Sydney. You got a lot more. Yeah, some of them are being absorbed by first-time buyers, but a lot of the areas where I believe a lot of the homes that are coming on market in Melbourne are in areas where really in the outskirts where a lot of the people don't really want to move to, and because of also due to issues with demographics.
Yeah, and the net rental returns in the Melbourne, Greater Melbourne area continues to go negative, and more negative than previously. So, investors can't actually deal with the cash flow in the negative sense. There's no capital appreciation, so where do they go? Now, interestingly, of course, Brisbane, story in Brisbane, 3,288 on the 20th, up to 3,339 on the 27th, so just a small rise. And in the auction story, there's a few around. Interestingly, that Victoria is leading the charge for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it's get out of Victoria. And it's a quick way to entice people to buy. That's my view. Other than that, we're tracking, on average, the same numbers as we were last year in terms of the across Sydney. But it's more interesting as to who participates, why they're participating, and what they're getting. It goes back to the what properties are people after, and what they think that they're getting as opposed to what they're really getting.
Absolutely, yes. Remember that a dog remains a dog. There are star properties out there, but there are also dog properties too. And unfortunately, turning a dog into a star is quite complicated. We'll just quickly look at the rentals. So in the Sydney region, 10,995 on the 20th, up to 11,388 the following week. So a continued rise. Whereas in Melbourne, now, as you said, less on the there, 9,547 on the 20th and 9,799 the week after. So, the story is still that the demand for rental property is still very high. The amount on market is relatively low. But in Sydney and Melbourne, it does look as though they're going slightly different directions.
Yeah, and again, I say there's a lot more on market in terms of sales. There was a report, one of the mainstream agencies reported that the sales, a lot of first-time buyers are moving in, but I don't believe that they're absorbing as the absorption rate isn't as good as what's being reported. I think the people there, if they're looking at buying, I'd say they're going to sit it out until they see more numbers in spring come on, and which will then put more pressure on the vendors to achieve the prices. So it's look, if I was in Melbourne, if I was looking in Melbourne, if I was a first time buyer, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be staying put until spring. I mean, there's a general seasonal retraction in numbers over winter. Spring is when everybody wants to come on. So not only do you get the investors that are feeling more pain because of the taxes that the state government's putting on them, but also you've got your natural rise in in home listings because your traditional market feels it's better to sell in spring than it is in winter. So potentially we could get back to close to flying close to your 30,000 listings on market there. And that would be interesting to see, and that would put a lot of pressure on that Melbourne region market, in terms of the trajectory of the prices.
Absolutely. Well, we'll continue to track that as we go ahead. As we come to the end of the show, Edwin, your tip of the week. This is a really, really important one. You might be able to find some cheap quotes online, but do you know what you're getting?
Yeah, this is interesting. This is from one of my clients. He said he rang up an old client. I helped him buy a property, and they're doing some work internally, and he's forever chasing the cheapest of the cheap. So he said, "Oh, look, I'm I'm going to get the bathrooms demolished." So I said, "Look, you need to, before you do anything, just break out a sample and take it and get it tested to see if it's if you're one of the unfortunate bastards that have got the asbestos fiber in the in the wall lining, and check all your wet areas." Sure enough, the reports came back as positive, and he said, "Do you have a guy that could look at it, that could remove it or demolish them?" So I gave him one of our contacts, our preferred contacts, and he said, "Oh, I found somebody else that's a bit cheaper." So I said, "Look, because you're a client, I gave you our contact. I don't make it a point to give out names willy nilly." And so he got it done. And I said, "Look, but before you do so, here's a tip: make sure that your guy, when they do remove the lining, make sure that they clean the nails properly from the timbers. Make sure that they get cleaned out properly. Make sure that the fibro that gets stuck between the screed or the cement, the floor tiles, and the wall, is lifted, is jackhammered up in the process." And so he said, "Oh, can you come and have a look at it?" So when I went and had a look at it after the job was done, it was about $1,000 cheaper than what our guy was proposing to do it. And I said, "Mate, you're going to have issues because the nails aren't cleaned and everything." Anyway, he said, "Oh, not to worry. He's happy. He's licensed." And I said, "Yeah, all good." So then this is the clincher, right? So then some of those timbers got left behind, some of the stuff got left behind, and they got put on top of a different bin. Obviously, they ordered a special bin for the asbestos sheeting that got put on the general waste bin, which is a 10 cubic meter bin. And he rings me up today and says, "Oh, they won't take the bin." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Oh, because there's asbestos fiber on on the timbers that got put on the top on the left hand." I said, "I told you." I said, "Why don't you talk to the company and tell them, look, you just dispose of those bits of timber yourself." So he rang him back and he said, "Oh, I can dispose of the timber myself. I'll take them off and get it properly disposed of." And the company said, "Look, it's too late. I'm sorry, but the whole bin is now contaminated. So we got to take it as though there's asbestos throughout the whole bin." And he just got hit with $4,500 more on top of on top. So yeah, look, horses for courses. I'm not saying that you go with the highest price, but you got to be careful. You got to ask the right questions when you're dealing with a lot of these online. And I'm sure it's the same for. I mean, I talk about this because of the work that we do. I talk about the construction and the building industry, and how many different trades make more money out of variations than they do out of the job. So because I'm across it. But I'm sure the same thing happens, in IT. I'm sure the same thing happens in a lot of different industries. We just got to be careful. So the tip of the day is, just because Google tells you it's cheaper, it's not necessarily going to be cheaper.
No, I think it's a very good point, Edwin. And my experience has always been go on personal recommendation rather than actually looking on the yellow pages or looking on Google, right? Because if you actually know of a good tradie, you might be paying a bit more. But if the quality of the work is good and the price is reasonable, then you've probably got a good deal. Whereas you don't know what you've got if you just go into the yellow pages and somebody turns up and you think, well, I don't know, is he going to do a good or she going to do a good job or a bad job? Nobody knows. So worth doing a due diligence on the way in again, because otherwise it costs a lot more to sweep it up later. So, Edwin, I want to say thank you very much. A very good show again and some really important points. Now, I knew made to make this point. I won't be around next week. The reason is that we've got some work in the street and the power is going to be on and off intermittently. So I can't guarantee to be around. So I think the best thing to do is I'm not doing any scheduled shows next week. So, Edwin, we're going to meet again in 2 weeks' time. So it'll feel like, a couple of days at least for the next show.
All good, Martin. You take care, look after yourself, and I'm not going to say stay cozy because you are cozy. We're the ones that are suffering with the cold over here now.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, rub two monkeys together and try and get some warmth. We'll see you later.
Ciao.
Cheers.